One of the most exciting things about working with Gun.io is I get to work with some of the most important consumer brands and fitness brands and enterprise brands. And what you find is that they're all looking for the very best talent and they're competing for it. And one thing I tell clients all the time is that, hey, if you can develop the mindset to hire remote freelance engineers, what you're going to find is that it opens up the pool of available talent, because you're not going to have to fight over the same group of FTEs from all the other companies in your space. And so now what we can do is bring you a cohort of people that other companies aren't competing with you against. And it's really a competitive advantage to take stock of that and find some excellent people you can bring on board.
This is the Frontier Podcast, powered by Gun.io, the engineer's choice for engineering talent. If you like what you hear, rate, review, and subscribe, and follow us on Twitter at The Frontier Pod.
John, it's great to have you on. Thanks for joining today.
I'm excited to be here.
So if you don't mind, maybe just give a little background story of yourself and your work, up to this point, so the audience can get to know you and where you're coming from.
Sure, you bet. So again, John Collier, and I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, which is southwestern Louisiana. I have been in the technology arena for about 27 years, and love every bit about it. My journey has taken me from network administration and server administration through DevOps career, but I've been managing people and teams since about 1996, somewhere in that range. Owned a few businesses, side businesses, consulting businesses, and in the last 12 years, I've spent most of my time in building SaaS applications with a variety of companies. One was affiliate marketing for a couple of years. And then I worked with a company called Conversa, and we built a product called Log My Calls, which was speech analytics for marketing phone calls, call tracking software, that type of thing. And most recently worked with CirclePix as CTO, and we built marketing software for realtors, virtual tours, text reminders, all kinds of tools for them. And then this last year, I worked with a company called Waldo out of Austin, Texas. And that was a lot of fun, doing facial recognition software. And then in the last 6-7 months, I started working with a company here in Lafayette called VieMed. And it's a health services, but durable medical equipment company. And we're bringing technology to this. So, yeah.
So a big path there from MarTech to speech analytics to medical. Wow. Draw me some lines there. I mean, how does that even happen to sort of all of a sudden get into durable medical equipment? I don't think people usually have that path.
It's a stretch for some paths. But I think the connecting line there is analytics on the underside, machine learning experience. Now, I'm not a data scientist myself, but I've managed teams and had several data scientists work with me. And I've just learned tons from them on what the capabilities are, where to find signal, building models, and that type of thing. So from speech analytics and being in that space for 6 years to facial analytics with Waldo. And now what we're looking at doing is taking the healthcare machinery that exists, that already collects data, and doing interesting things with it. And so when I heard of the opportunity, I said, I haven't done much in healthcare, but I'm very familiar with the space through friends and coworkers and whatnot. But and taking technology into healthcare was very interesting to me. Number one, because it's an amazing opportunity right now, but number two, it's where you can make a giant difference. And I've seen a huge need for innovation in healthcare. It's been very slow moving over the years. So I was excited to be in the space.
Yeah, and you guys work with ventilators, right? So that's sort of some critical stuff going on there. And I imagine that the data opportunities are enormous, that there's a real-time stream of life-altering data that's being generated. And right now, I don't know, maybe it doesn't go anywhere into analysis that can actually help people. Is that the path of the innovation to use the data?
I think it's a slow path. And in the medical industry, we have to be careful before declaring anything life-saving, of course. By getting in the critical path, it would take a lot of certification and that type of thing. What we're going to be working on in the first parts of this are making sure our signal is straight, making sure what we're finding in the data has some value. So things along the lines of when we gather vent data, it's already there to be gathered. Several of the manufacturers of these vents, and we don't only do vents, we do oxygen concentrators, lymphedema pumps. We have another division that does CPAP machines for sleep apnea patients, which you kind of see the thread, and they have some similar functions. It's all around the lungs and breathing healthy. The vents are unfortunately a terminal patient, therefore a COPD or ALS patient. And, making those last years of somebody's life count and being able to enjoy life a little bit more while they are still with the families is very important to us. We plan on enhancing what we do from them while our competitors just want to sell more vents. We want to provide more value.
Sure. So you talked off mic, I think this is a really unique circumstance that you were able to, work very closely with the company before coming on, and the mandate being, sort of, hey, build a technology, human and machine infrastructure such that, that we can achieve this broad, future mandate. So, sort of bring technology to the fold in this business. Maybe, talk about that a little bit. That's on the one hand, super exciting. On the other hand, you end up at that, sort of minute one and be like, well, okay, I got the job and it's just me and a whiteboard, so what do I do?
Yeah. So, well, fortunately I've built a few teams over the years. And I think probably the most relevant experience was at Log My Calls, where I started off with 3 guys, fired 2, and built a team from 0 up to about 110 on my team over a 6-year period. We did some pretty good numbers there, and the company was doing pretty well when I left. But starting here, that wasn't too daunting because I had several people that I wanted to reach out to see, after some of my non-competes and non-solicits had expired, if they'd come back and work with me. And I've been very lucky to bring several of my path engineers with me. I already had just from the experience and from a lot of hands-on the DevOps side of things, an idea of how we would build this out. Similar infrastructure from the previous 2, all Amazon based. So putting it all onto paper, putting it all onto the whiteboard, as you mentioned, was the way of going about it, and just start presenting to the board, presenting to the exec team, making sure that I was on the same path as where they were going with this, selling them my ideas. And then it just became all of our ideas that we just started working towards. I also made a few key hires almost immediately, a VP of product and marketing, which was a rare find with a guy that I'd worked with previously also. And he and I are really good friends. And so he's now chief marketing officer, and we co-own the whole product, which is very exciting because we have a wonderful relationship. Director of engineering, who's one of the most talented engineers I've ever worked with, and he's out of Portugal, and the list goes on. I also took over the CIO role here as I let our CIO go, and I'm rebuilding the internal team as well. That's been the daunting part. That's been the tough part because it's just a lot to tackle. But yeah.
So, and maybe people don't always know the weird sort of gray space between CIO and CTO, and so as you're talking about, digital transformation, product facing and market facing, and then, internal, because you have a lot of that cultural shift that needs to happen to support your roadmap. What's that like in the navigating, both of those?
That has been a bigger step by far for this company than the CTO. Here's why. In my CTO role, I'm building product that nobody's expecting yet. So nobody's depending on this. On the internal side, we have 330 employees, depending on an ERP system, our accounting system, our mail and productivity suite. Part of our process is for that ERP system is intake, and we have respiratory therapists across the nation who are dealing with doctors that have very different systems, and most of them, believe it or not, have zero access to any type of API to send any data. All patient records are being sent as 70-page faxes, and we've still got people with one screen up with the fax and then doing data entry into this ERP. And as you can imagine, it's clunky at best and outdated for sure. So building up an internal team, providing business analytics. I've got a brand new data analytics team, and we're creating dashboards and stuff like that. And then I've got a new programmer analyst who I've just hired, who will also start working on some efficiencies, basically interviewing each of the department managers and seeing what they can do to improve throughput. We've got to scale this company, scaling at an incredible speed. So we've got to help scale with less employees per patient.
And you talked about the internal being even more challenging than the external. Is it the nature of, sort of rebuild the plane while you're flying it in that case?
For sure. And everybody feels what you're doing when you're not building a brand new product. Everybody feels the changes that you're making. All 300 employees know the things that you're working on, the payment processing, the this, the that, and the other. They know exactly when they're waiting on something, the pressure to get things done is there. The executive dashboards that never existed, first time viewing there's a lot of stuff happening on the internal.
And there's that mixed blessing of, total transparency, I imagine, of, the organization can get away with a lot of stuff that it couldn't before, or rather before it could get along with or get away with things that, transparency of data is, sort of cuts both ways. Even when your culture is not maybe ready to be fully observed.
We have a few people, such as our CFO, who are fantastic in presenting data, but it takes days and hours to bring this to light and to display it throughout. We're required to be transparent. We're a publicly traded company, but getting at it has been difficult, to say the least. And now I've got a superstar business analyst, a data analyst, who's creating great Tableau dashboards and meeting regularly with the entire management team to show them stuff, the sales team to show them opportunities and bring up opportunities for improvement. This is the first time that this company has worked on key performance indicators, and stating them and showing them, and we're getting TV sets and dashboards all throughout the facility, so that people know, how they're doing. So it's going to bring giant dividends for us.
How do you work with the operations function? Because it brings up an interesting question. That CIO is always one of those roles that, sort of came out of data-driven marketing, and it came out of data-driven operations, and you got your COO and you got your CMO, and everybody looks to you to do kind of all those things. It's really what used to be, maybe that IT function, but much more, on the data and information side. And then you've got all your market dynamics coming in from, new product development and roadmap and all that stuff. Is that a place where you see filling both seats, kind of indefinitely, or is that interim?
It's interim. I knew that the guy that I had was not the right fit for now, and that I would have to take over it simply because I had more experience. Great guy, just wasn't able to fulfill all of the needs that I had in coming in. And I've done it several times before again, and it's a lot. It's a heavy load, but I think down the road, either through internal promotions and helping the guys that I'm working with, and guys and gals that I'm working with, to possibly fill that seat. But I think just on our current growth path, will probably be another year where I'm covering both. But yeah, I don't think it's definitely not indefinite. It's too much of a load to carry indefinitely. And they're different mindsets, by the way. It's a different hat that you have to wear when you're going from CIO to CTO. And in certain organizations where they're more operational in nature, you may have a CTO who reports to a CIO. In our case, where we're trying to make the transformation into a technology company, a healthcare technology company, it'll be a CIO reporting to me. I actually report to the COO of the company rather than the CEO, because he's more operationally sound. He has a better organization or head for organization versus our CEO, who's brilliant when it comes to marketing and investor relations and vision and more of that entrepreneurial mindset as well. So.
Yeah, and so much of that is important as folks are designing and building organizations that take best advantage of the skills, at the table. And you quickly find that, sort of the textbook models of who reports to who and where, that's going to change like organizational level per organization. And, it's critically important. You talked about having a nearly full remote team on the technology side. And I would imagine that's not the case for the rest of the business. And so there might be some cultural shifts there, bringing remote work to the fray. What's that been like?
You said it. I'm the first one to have brought talent from outside of the country. This company has offices in 14 states. And a lot of that's just brick and mortar requirements from Medicare. We're very much centrally located. And then our respiratory therapists generally work from their home, and then they have a set of areas that they cover. But on my team, I've worked for the last, probably 11, 12 years with remote teams, and have learned the tools to make that work. Mostly just daily stand-ups, video chats over either Google Hangouts or Meet now, or whatever the tool is du jour, right? But daily meetings, face-to-face, when we can get together in one of the common places and drink beer and have fun together. But that's really extremely important. Then Slack and Jira or whatever your tool sets are for the communication. But communication makes it happen. So when I am recruiting, I simply try and spread out to a pretty well-defined network that I've got, that I've built over the years. And what I'm looking for is the best engineers, period. Wherever they're from. And That's not always U.S. There is a tremendous amount of talent in the U.S., but there's a tremendous amount of talent elsewhere. And I sometimes compartmentalize what kind of talent I'll look for in different countries. But I'm currently on this very small team that I'm still building. I've got about a third of the people that I'm hiring right now. But we've got a couple guys in the Ukraine. We've got one in Portugal who's actually from Poland. I've got 3 in Argentina. I've got a couple in the Philippines, and then I've had engineers from many other places as well. But yeah.
So you talked about having the very best engineers. It's something that we think about all the time. Like, how do you measure and what's the systems for, weeding out the 1%? So I always ask, yeah, sure, we have our system, but what, from your perspective and experience, are the heuristics for, sort of hiring and retaining the very best, engineering talent? How do you know when you're talking to that person?
That's a great question, since I'm not a software engineer myself. My experience comes from more on the DevOps. I'm still quite technical, and I still do most of the architecture myself, but hands-on coding, no. And so I start off with probably a group of 3 or 4 of the guys that I've worked with in the past who are superstar engineers and who have already built stuff with me. And then we vet them out together. So to me, personality is as important as the talent is. Culture, the cliche culture fit. It's real. Number one, I'm as a manager, as a leader, I am definitely not a micromanager. I believe in hiring great people and giving them the freedom to do what they do best. So part of that is the culture. Second, we test every engineer that we bring on board. So we have a verbal interviewing position. Generally, my director of engineers will do that. And then we prepared several mini tests that the engineers, depending on their discipline, will do. It's a 3 to 4 hour coding project. And some people don't want to do that. Some people think that's, well, you're going to pay me to do this. No, this is what you're going to do to see if we'll hire you. Contractor or full-time, we do the same thing. And we're pretty insistent on it. So somebody turns in their code, we look through their code. Does it supply unit tests? Does it have good documentation? Does it have a good README file that we know how to install it? And you're talking about your dependencies and libraries that you used. Does it include a to-do list, things that you got to, things that you didn't get to? How many questions did you ask? Because a lot of times in our mini tests, we'll throw in things that when the engineer sees it, they say, why would they do it that way? Well, that was in there on purpose, just to have you ask. He said, are you sure you want to do it that way? No, we wanted you to question. If that's the people are doing it. That's what we want. Is we want a very collaborative, a person who's going to question decisions, who's going to challenge, somebody who can really get in there and own it. So
that's great. I love that, especially the to-do list part, like what you get to and what you didn't, because it shows that there's a longer term disposition to every project, and you just aren't done. There's no mythical done. And, going on to release new things and having new ideas, that's a good way to suss that out. So excellent. Right. Excellent.
One more piece of that is we're generally looking for, because I've never worked with a company that's been just a quick whammy app to build. So I'm also looking for somebody who's stuck with a specific project for over a year, that has developed a roadmap of a specific app. When somebody says I built 40 or 50 iOS apps, for example, that's great for somebody. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who built an app hopefully in the healthcare space, and they've spent a year and a half developing version after version after version, improving its performance, improving the feature set, etc.
And you do that because it displays a certain level of, the qualities that you look for in someone who, would work on your team because it matches your culture. So, it's using the technology approach for the whole purpose of finding those people. Excellent. Exactly. Well, John, this is a great story. Thanks for joining us, and good luck with a very bold adventure.
Thanks, Ledge. It's been awesome. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast, produced by Gun.io. We're the only freelancing platform where engineers actually go to hire other engineers. If you enjoyed the show and want to learn more about how to hire or freelance with us, head over to gun.io/podcast to get in touch, and we'll pay for your first 10 hours with a kick-ass engineer.